Now we'll go to actually my next slide. Speaking of bunnies and how do we see things? I'm a duck. I'm a bunny. No, I need it. So it's really about how do we see things. You know, in the song that Carol just sang, about seeing clearly. About seeing things clearly, about seeing obstacles. Once the cloud, once the weather in our life clears, we can see the obstacles that are in our way. When we see things clearly, suddenly they're no longer obstacles. It's something, okay, I'm going to navigate differently, but it doesn't need to hold us. It's really all about how do we see things, and are we willing to see things differently? Next slide, please. This is an old classic. Who can see the beautiful woman? Who can see the more aged beautiful woman? Perfect. Who can see both? They're both there. How are you looking at it? And the next slide, please. And with that, I invite everyone to just take a nice deep breath. Rows and flows of angel hair, and ice cream castles in the air, and feathered canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way. I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's cloud illusions that I recall. I've never really known clouds at all. So Joni Mitchell wrote that song in 1966. She was in a plane, she was reading a book, Henderson and the Sun God, and there was a beautiful quote in it, in jest or in essence, of, I look down and I dream of clouds, but as a kid, I used to look up and dream of clouds. In that instant, she had the inspiration, and she wrote the lyrics to this song, which would ultimately become one of her biggest hits. It's beautiful because talking about looking at clouds from the innocence, from the wonder of a child, and then looking at them from a different perspective, where they just blocks the sun, and it's a deterrent. It's a yes and. It can be both. Which will you choose? Moons and Junes and Ferris wheels, the dizzy dancing way that you feel when every fairy tale becomes real. I've looked at love that way, but now it's just another show. Leave them laughing when you go, and if you care, let them know. Don't give yourself away. I've looked at love from both sides now, from give and take, and still somehow it's love's illusions that I recall. Have I ever really known love at all? Love is such a complicated thing. Our first love, when we come into this world, the love of a mother. Our first love, our first pets. There's the romantic love. I've experienced love in many different ways. From the Mrs. Robinsons to all the myriad types of love. But what I've come to realize here at this center, we talk about a different type of love. We talk about love only. That creative energy, that impulse, that's who and what I am. No one can bring love to me, and no one can take it away from me. We have the opportunity to bump into people, to collide, where they get to ignite, open up a different dimension of the love that I am. And I realize that that has been one of my greatest lessons in life, the acknowledgement and the love of self. To truly love and experience the wonder and the love of who I am. Tears and fears, then feeling proud to say I love you right out loud. Dreams and schemes and circuit crowds, I've lived my life that way. But now old friends, they're acting strange. They shake their heads and tell me that I've changed. Well, some things are lost and some things are gained by just living every day. I've looked at life from both sides now, from win and lose, and give and take, and up and down, and still somehow it's life's illusions that I recall. I've never really known love. I've never really known life. I've never really known clouds until now. Thank you. Thank you very much. So if anyone knows me, that was a stretch. And there have been a couple of things that I've come to realize in this moment in particular. I fondly think of my high school music teacher, Sue Stewart. Hi, Sue. And one of the great lessons that I learned, but not when I was in high school, but many years later, was the understanding of music isn't necessarily about hitting the right notes. It's the space between the notes. And I don't consider myself a singer, but I do consider myself someone who loves to think deeply and contemplate ideas and themes and poems and songs. So that was my stretch to, was I willing to see myself differently? So thank you for that opportunity. So the title of my talk could have been, what the hell were you thinking, Eric? But it's not. Next slide, please. The question is, how is the view? And we've been talking about it, and we've been experientially sort of looking, what's the perspective that we see? I had the great opportunity the beginning of last month to travel to Uganda. Next slide. And I got to travel with the Greater Contribution with Karen Wright and Peggy and Scott and Marilyn. Had a remarkable trip. And, you know, it was interesting. I had a couple of friends who I won't mention their names, Reverend Liza and Reverend Tiffany, who were talking a little bit like, Eric, you're going to Uganda? Why are you going to Uganda? Are you having another midlife crisis? And I said, you know, I don't know why, and yet I knew that I was being inspired to go. So I said yes. How often have I had the opportunity to travel to that part of the world, to go visit some of the innermost villages in northern Uganda? So of course I said yes, with the curiosity of, why am I here? So these are actually some pictures of, at the center was the day where we went to Merchant Falls and had a phenomenal day doing a safari, and just some of the wonderful people and experiences that we met. And this was not an easy trip. You know, it was about 18 hours, 19 hours of flying to get there and the land, and then it was about a 9-hour drive from the airport up, or Kampala, up to Gulu, where we were staying. It was treacherous, or so I thought, until the next day when we started actually going to do the work. And the work is the work of the Greater Contribution, which many of you may be familiar with. And it's an organization that goes in to small inner villages, and they offer microloans to the women, helping them sort of lift themselves up to a different level and reality of existence. And when I say treacherous, that's where the treachery really began. Because each day we would actually go out, it would be about a half-hour, 40-minute drive on paved roads, and then another 45 minutes on completely unpaved roads. We were out in the middle of seemingly nowhere. And at the same time, I was getting emails. Next slide, please. Of an installation that was going on simultaneously when I was in Uganda. So this is a residence that I was working on in Newport Beach. So these images were coming in of, you know, a $60 million house and their master suite of Newport Beach. And next slide, please. And this is a typical village that we went into. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to deny the Newport Beach one has much better plumbing. But when I really think of, and you can go to the next slide, please. I'm sitting in this contrast of the two worlds. Simultaneously, both sides, both are real. And simultaneously, the war in Ukraine, thank you. The Ukrainian war was just happening. We were about 4 or 5 days into that as we were going into this. And I found myself sitting in the center of it all. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is why I'm here. Anyone who's taking class with me, it's kind of turned into a joke, the law of polarity. You know, one of the great things about this teaching, the entire New Thought movement, transcendental movement, really was based in oneness and is based in oneness, meaning there is no duality. There's no this or that. It's all one thing. And yet the law of polarity, what that does, it gives us the opportunity to experientially see different perspectives, but we reside and we live in the center. So I found myself living in that center in Uganda. And there was one morning where we got up to go on to Merchant Falls, and it was before sunrise. So I was sitting in the van, and I happened to just look out the window and look up. And the stars were magnificent. And I just started to cry. And I probably cried for about 20 minutes, just in terms of we are all of it simultaneously. You know, and then one of the other things that I really sat with that really sort of challenged me was, what is the perspective that I'm going into this whole experience? You know, I knew that the greater contribution was doing some really great work in the world. And when I was there, I realized it was doing really great work. It was going in and it was microloans, but it was teaching concepts of self-reliance. There were some really remarkable things. And I also realized that I was challenging myself. And Scott Gibb and I had some amazing conversations about, do I have a problem being around poor people? I said, no, I really don't. My issue is I don't see them as poor. You know, and for me, that was my second aha moment of, oh, my greatest contribution with the greater contribution is to lift any labels or assumptions or the perspective of seeing them as these poor people that need to be saved, that need to be helped. That was one of the greatest contributions for me of how can I go through life? How does my consciousness, how can I live from the absolute to the best of my ability, regardless of what the relative conditions of life are looking at? And I realize that is, you know, certainly an ongoing challenge. Next slide, please. So Ernest Holmes, I'm going to put my glasses on for this one. I actually pulled some old Ernest Holmes. He actually writes, poverty is an impoverished thought, a belief in lack or limitation, a lack of knowledge that substance and supply are spiritual, a result of the inability to perceive that prosperity is ever present, a denial of good, a limited sense of the universe. And then the opposite, prosperity. He writes, prosperity is the outpicturing of substance in our affairs. Everything in the universe is for us. Nothing is against us. We must know that everywhere we go, we meet friendship, love, human interest, and helpfulness. Life is ever giving of itself. We must receive, utilize, and extend the gift. Success and prosperity are spiritual attributes belonging to all people, but not necessarily used by all people. So when I returned from that trip, I was telling my dad about my experiences. And in a very lovingly way, he said, so going into the villages in consideration of everything that's going on in the world, does it really make a difference? And it was from a sincerity. And we had a beautiful conversation. I said, I've got to believe, and I do believe that it does. Peace begins within. When we can have one conversation or we can make one ripple in one woman's life, and that ripples out to her family, and it just ripples and ripples and compounds and compounds and compounds. So I do believe with the enormity of everything going on in the world, that's one end of the polarity, and the insular, the itty-bitty in the silence. That's equally as powerful because it's all one thing. So I do believe every interaction can change the world. Next slide, please. What will you choose to see? Namaste.